Venezuela was once one of the most prosperous nations in Latin America. By 2018, the nation faced a severe political, economic, social, and humanitarian crisis. I think it's needless to say this, as we probably hear it often in the news. But in these minutes, I would like to summarize the main reasons for this catastrophe that has caused one of the most regrettable exoduses of this century. Venezuela's economy is currently the economy with the highest economic decline in the world. By the end of 2017, the economy declined by 14% compared to the previous year, a fairly low percentage considering that the average growth of the region is between 2 and 3%. This is hard to believe for the country that has the most oil reserves in the world and that in the 60s was as rich as countries like Norway. But precisely, many analysts say that this resource may have been one of the keys to the economic disaster that is experienced today. Since the expropriation of many private companies and the protectionism demanded during the Chavez era, which was leaving Venezuela increasingly isolated from the international community, the economy was basically centralizing on oil. Since its fall from the 70s, naturally the country's economy did the same. In response, the Venezuelan government acquired increasing debts it couldn't pay long term. Because of this, and due to the protectionist measures that prevented foreign investment and limited imports, the country was increasingly undersupplied, and thousands of businesses began to go bankrupt. Faced with the lack of supplies, both the governments of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro made one of the worst mistakes any government could make: the printing of more and more money, which by basic laws of economics is counterproductive, as producing more money than the amount of goods a country has generates inflation. That is, the currency is losing its value and therefore it devalues compared to other currencies and prices tend to rise. This table shows how it fell 3.9% in 2014, 5.7% in 2015, 10% in 2016, and up to 14% more in 2017. But the catastrophe exploded in 2018 when inflation reached 5 figures by August of 2018, and it is estimated that at this rate, the year would close with 1,000,000% inflation. Probably one of the most terrible consequences of the economic crisis is the daily shortage that is experienced in Venezuela. Well, because no matter how much you may belong to that small 13% of the population that does not live below the poverty line, that would not save you from facing the long lines that have to be made day by day to get basic products such as food, basic necessities, medicines, among others. On this, there are many theories about the reasons for this shortage. But let's go to the base of this problem, which is something simple to understand. No matter how rich a country is in resources, if there is a misuse of both natural resources and human resources, space, time, among others, everything can go wrong. This can be seen in the fact that when a large number of companies are nationalized, no matter how good the intentions of the state may be, it will not have the experience or the know-how to manage resources as those knowledgeable in each field would. To this must be added the tremendous bureaucracy that affects every entrepreneur. For example, to import products in Venezuela, which is necessary for any business, you have to buy dollars that are sold by the state, in addition to carrying out procedures that can last months before finalizing a purchase abroad. National companies lose a lot of time filling out forms and waiting for their responses, which takes away from productivity time. This directly affects the food industry, as while there are delays in filling out forms, the food in the warehouses spoils before it can be consumed. All of this is a vicious circle, as this generates the huge lines that people have to make to get these products, which represents millions of man-hours lost in the supermarket line that could be used to improve productivity. So in the long run, this generates more shortages. This is probably the most controversial point we will touch on in this video. However, we must try to impartially look at the political landscape of Venezuela and base ourselves on the facts. First, the regime led by Nicolas Maduro, which currently governs the Caribbean country, is the continuation of the Chavista regime that began in 1999 under the slogan of the implementation of the Bolivarian Revolution, that is, a socialist revolution that boasted of seeking equality of people based on anti-imperialism and a neoliberal counter-revolution to reach a socialist society. However, Regardless of whether the reforms taken in this revolution were with good intentions or not, the fact is that the country has plummeted economically and consequently socially, especially since the death of Chavez and the takeover of Nicolás Maduro, who came to power in 2013, and despite the constant protests of the people, which to date have left hundreds dead, the regime clings to power. Many political analysts believe that in July of 2017, democracy was declared dead after the Supreme Court of Justice, which was full of regime loyalists, stripped the National Assembly, that is, the Congress of Powers. With this and the subsequent formation of the Constituent Assembly, there are fewer and fewer opponents who can stand up to the regime. This is compounded by the incentives given to the armed forces, which are increasingly evident to be loyal to Maduro as well. This is a major impediment for citizens to rise up against the government because, let's be realistic, no matter how much the entire people struggle with the few weapons they could get, they could never face the artillery and weaponry of the armed forces. And well, I know it seems like I've already said a lot, but there's still more to come. This regime has been characterized by the constant censorship of the media that oppose it. It's easy to deduce that a country without freedom of expression is easier to control, as this would keep the people uninformed about any type of corruption in the government. To this is added the imprisonment of hundreds of political opponents who have had to go through trials, guess from whom? Yes, from the Supreme Court led by loyalists to the regime. So, to recap, judicial power, legislative power, and armed forces loyal to the regime, hundreds of political opponents behind bars, lack of freedom of expression, repressed population, and no possibility of voting in clean elections. As I said at the beginning, it is not my intention to go against anyone's political ideas, but all of the above are the ingredients of a dictatorship that many governments around the world criticize and label as such. Well, we have broadly discussed what is happening in the country. Now it's time to talk about the consequences that the Venezuelan people suffer from all of the above. According to the latest figures, 87% of Venezuelans live in a state of poverty, while 61% live in conditions of extreme poverty. Here I'd like to emphasize, perhaps we haven't heard this term many times, but it would be good to internalize it. 6 out of 10 Venezuelans living under these conditions earn less than $1.5 a day, meaning they literally have nothing to eat. On many occasions, they have to skip one of the 3 meals, so it's very common to see some of them rummaging through the trash. These people also lack other basic needs like drinking water, shelter, healthcare, and education. And here we open more vicious circles. Without access to clean water and good nutrition, it's natural that they suffer from diseases that they can't treat because they are also deprived of good health services. And in turn, if they were to get care, it's likely they wouldn't find some medications due to the aforementioned shortage. Another vicious circle is that of education. It's well known that uneducated people are easier to manipulate, and no matter how many schools are opened, let's be realistic. What young person or child could study if their stomach is empty? Hunger is difficult to fathom if you've never truly experienced it. I'm honest and say that I haven't experienced it either, but I'm aware that it's a torment that slowly kills you. This is reflected in this alarming fact, where the average Venezuelan lost an average of 11.5 kilograms during 2017. Given the alarming figures we reviewed a moment ago, the growing mass exodus that Venezuelans are experiencing today is totally understandable. As the saying goes, when hunger strikes, shame loosens. So we see hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans who, despite having a professional degree, do not hesitate to seek any opportunity abroad, venturing into the unknown. Many of them without even having a family member or acquaintance waiting for them, nor with the certainty of where they were going to stay or if they would find something to eat. Professional degree or not, some go out on the streets to find something to sustain themselves. The situation worsens when some fight not only for themselves, but for the families they have to support. This exodus actually started about 3 years ago. The economically better off started leaving the country first, so several were able to go to farther countries like the United States and Spain. As I mentioned earlier, the crisis was radically identified in 2018, and the last to leave were the less fortunate people, who consequently, without money to buy a plane ticket, had to opt for the land road to the nearest countries. given that the border to the north, Panama, has been closed since the country established the visa requirement in October 2017. The countries that have received the most migrants are those of South America, Colombia, which has received almost 900,000 immigrants, Ecuador, around 600,000, Peru, which is almost reaching 500,000, Chile, around 150,000, Argentina, and Brazil, 100,000. Therefore, estimates indicate that between 2.5 and 3 million Venezuelans, that is 1 in 10, have left their country in the last 4 years. This makes it the largest diaspora in the history of this country and the most significant of the century in Latin America. This crisis has crossed borders and has become a headache for the entire region. In recent months, Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia have begun to require passports for the entry of Venezuelans, which, beyond its excessive price unattainable for most Venezuelans, could take months to obtain due to the aforementioned widespread bureaucracy. Therefore, thousands of people who can't afford the bus have to walk thousands of kilometers to reach other countries, exhausted, hungry, and thirsty. Now, with this bureaucratic barrier, many have been stranded at the borders, as they do not have what is necessary to return. So, given the previously seen figures, we are no longer talking about a migration crisis, but a humanitarian crisis, which is estimated to continue escalating to worse consequences, such as the emergence of new mafias that promote human trafficking. That is, if these people who have been stranded at the border see their children dying of hunger, it is most likely that they have no choice but to accept any proposal that helps them cross the border, even if it is illegal, just as it happens at the border between Mexico and the United States. So, it will not be news that in the following months we see news like this. Well, I think we've already touched on the drama that Venezuelans live in their country, but what about those who have managed to enter other countries, most of whom have not been able to get a decent job according to their profession? To be honest, the situation is getting increasingly challenging. It's true that the migration destinations are not rich countries and therefore do not present great opportunities to get ahead. Therefore, many of them take to the streets as street vendors or find informal jobs. This has allowed many entrepreneurs to take advantage of the situation and offer jobs with reduced wages that Venezuelans ultimately have no choice but to accept. This has been noticed by the locals of each country, who increasingly see Venezuelan migrants as a burden that takes away opportunities. It is also true that some have engaged in criminal activity, which not only tarnishes their image but that of all Venezuelans day by day. This can be seen in events like those that happened in Pacarema, Brazil, the border town with Venezuela, where locals burned the tents and belongings of Venezuelans because of a person they found robbing. If I have no government, if I have no authority that does nothing for us, we will take justice into our own hands, Venezuelans out of Pacarema. That's how it works from now on. Look, I know many will not agree with me using the word xenophobia, but if we stick literally to the meaning of the word and then review a bit of social media and user reactions to the news of this crisis, I regret to affirm that the problem is real regarding the immigration policies that are taken in your country, of which you are free to opine. The truth is that these types of attitudes are an additional burden for those Venezuelans who are really trying to get ahead. Consider that in addition to many having lost their jobs, businesses gone bankrupt, suffered from shortages and had to emigrate in an improvised way and without a future plan, you have the right to express your views on your country's immigration policies. I just wanted to clarify the causes of this humanitarian crisis and raise awareness that if Venezuelans are massively fleeing to your country, it's not for pleasure,